All right, fellas, how we doing? How is everybody today?
Doing
Doing
well.
excellent.
Doing well. Nice to meet you guys. Nice to see you. Appreciate
Awesome.
it, Braxton.
Of course, no, I'm happy you guys were all able to tune in. I know we've got a pretty decent amount of people. I know this is one of the more registered events that we've hosted, or one of the most registered webinars. So this is primarily predicated for everybody who's listening, going to be a live Q&A. We've got people here with different levels of expertise from all ranges and different backgrounds, things like that. So we'll be able to answer pretty much every question you guys have. So if there's anybody in the chat and you guys have questions that you really are looking for an answer, you can drop them at any time. The chat is open. We're kind of just going to round robin it. But first, I want to introduce everybody, let them give a little bit of background on themselves if you haven't seen them, or if this is your second or third time seeing them, just so you know who you're listening to, and that way you can understand the credentials they have. I'm first going to start. I'm going to start with Mr. Andrew Wall. Andrew, if you'd be kind enough to just kind of give a little rundown on yourself to everybody who's listening.
Yeah, thanks, Braxton. Andrew Wall, I'm a registered agent under the Dalmore brokerage, but have a DBA that's Dynex Capital. Been in the EB-5 world for almost 14 years now. Known a lot of these guys for a long time. We essentially help clients do due diligence on for project selection, a little bit of hand holding through the immigration process. Immigration questions here and there, but we leave the majority of the immigration questions to guys like Matt. So happy to connect whenever time if you want to reach out to me
Cool.
later.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks, Andrew. And then speaking of Matt, I'll have you introduce yourself. We're really happy to have you on here. Give a little rundown on yourself, where you based out of, your expertise, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so my name's Matt Galati, and I answer immigration questions. I am based in the Philadelphia suburbs. That's where our law firm is located. I'm the principal of the Galati Law Firm, founded in 2020, although my EB-5 experience goes way back to 2011. EB-5 is the vast majority of what we do. We have cases here and there that aren't EB-5, but just about everything is helping new investors get into the program,
Mhm.
as well as being there when things go wrong for investors. Maybe a case is taking too long, maybe there's a denial,
Mhm.
maybe USCIS is overcharging on fees, and we need to knock those back down. So we're kind of involved in the entire process from the beginning to the very end. We've helped thousands of families get through it, and it's my pleasure to be here today with you guys.
Cool. Cool. Thanks, man. And then last but certainly not least, we'll transition, Mr. Trevor. I know you're a recurring guest on these webinars. If you just give everybody a little refresh on your background.
Yeah, thanks, Braxton. My name is Trevor Anderson. I'm the director of EB-5 at HomeFed Corporation. We are principally a real estate development company based in San Diego, California, but we do development projects all around the country. One thing that's really unique about HomeFed is we're wholly owned by Jefferies Financial Group, so a public company traded on New York Stock Exchange. And for the last decade, we've been really enjoying the EB-5 program, doing our part to uh, structure and offer EB-5 investors some of the best, safest EB-5 investment opportunities, where they can, achieve their goals of getting their green card and preserve their capital, get a little return. It's been a great program for HomeFed, and we hope to continue, with this EB-5 deal for many more years.
Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Trevor. And then I myself, I am moderating, so I'll be the one asking the questions today. I'm the representative for EB5 Lending Alliance, the beautiful backgrounds you'll see on everybody's screen. So again, thank you guys for joining. So I'll jump into some questions. Like I said, I'm going to round robin, just kind of go in a circle and ask away. I know each of you three have different levels of expertise. The first one I'm going to direct it towards Matthew. Matthew, a common question right now with the I-526E, what is the current processing time looking like when it comes to the I-526E right now? Does it vary origin country? What's the current timeline and landscape look like for that?
It should or vary based on the origin of the country, right? So when we had quota backlogs in EB-5 and the legacy program, they did throttle the adjudication of some petitions, basically to prevent children from aging out, right? Because long story short, when if a petition is pending, like an I-526E, the kids' ages are frozen so they can immigrate with their parents, even though they might be adults by the time of the approval, right? Now
Mhm.
everything's current, so it shouldn't vary by origin of the funds, origin of the country. USCIS claims it's first in, first out, but it certainly doesn't seem that way.
Yeah.
We have seen cases ranging from a matter of a couple of weeks, like 6, 8 weeks, to significantly longer than that. And I think the biggest factor that is involved with that is whether or not a project has a 956F approval. So
Mhm.
when Congress rewrote our EB-5 laws 3 years ago, seems just like yesterday, they required projects to file for pre-approval of all the project elements of the EB-5 investment, right? That's called an I-956F. And you can apply on a project if the 956F is pending, but none of the investors get their cases adjudicated until that happens. The
Okay.
other thing that seems to be a difference is rural versus high unemployment projects. Rural projects, 9 times out of 10, will go faster than high unemployment. But again, I think the most important thing for as far as speed is concerned is that 956F approval.
Cool. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I know there's a lot of intricacies and, there's a lot of variance, case by case, but it's always good to, at least have the general scope of things.
Yeah.
So for Andrew, everybody's source of funds is going to be a little bit different. With the clients that you guys work with, if somebody were to maybe get their funds through a gifting or crypto, what kind of source of funds are legitimate and what could maybe raise some red flags when it comes to, where they're sourcing the money?
Honestly, Braxton, I think this is a Matt question, to be
Okay.
clear. I mean, we have source of funds that we see in all different avenues. I mean, a lot of home equity loans, we're seeing vested shares, we're seeing gifts from family and friends. Obviously, ideally, if the funds are all domestic or earned through W-2 earnings, that's awesome for us, kind of an easy process. The international funding is a little iffier, but I'm going to defer to Matt here.
Yeah,
He's seeing these on a daily basis.
I gotcha. I got you. I got you. Well, Matt, back to you then. When it comes to, source of funds and exactly, the technicalities and where the money comes from, what's legitimate, what's not, can you kind of speak a little bit about what's preferred and what may cause a red flag?
Yeah, I mean we've seen just about everything at this point, from lottery winners to mass tort settlements to Gujarati pomegranate farmers, right? So it's all been there. You did bring up crypto, right? And
Mhm.
I think that illustrates a point that is makes EP5 a little different than some other countries' programs, is that the scope of the source of funds isn't necessarily on someone's net worth, but more on proving exactly where every penny that's going into the investment or into the admin fee is coming from, right?
Mhm.
And crypto is a great example of that because crypto is meant to be anonymous but traceable, right? For the
Mhm.
most part, you have a blockchain that kind of sets up every single transaction. In that regard, USCIS has been pretty aggressive. They don't like things like cold wallets, for example. They want to see things on exchanges like your Coinbases, your Krakens, things like that.
Mhm.
And I think that I don't want to say a hostility towards crypto involved funds, but there's certainly a hesitation, right? So
Mhm.
we've advised clients to try not to use that if at all possible. I think what's been tried and true since the program began is something that Andrew mentioned, home equity loans. Certainly, I would say upwards of 95% of cases coming out of East Asia are going to involve some sort of property transaction, be
Mhm.
it a home equity loan, be it a sale of property. But, it all depends. Things are different. Everybody's going to have a different path. Your H-1B in the United States doing EB-5 might have vested shares in a tech company, might be taken out from his or her 401k, might just be, stacking salary deposit upon salary deposit in a savings account. It's just important to sit down with an attorney and go over what options are available to you. And ultimately, it's the client's decision, but we prefer the path of least resistance, of course.
Cool. Gotcha. Yeah. Awesome. 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 I'll go to Trevor here. Trevor, a common thing we're seeing in a lot of projects on the market is a fund administrator. Can you kind of speak exactly about what exactly is a fund administrator and the roles in which they carry throughout a project?
Yeah, so when the EB-5 program was rewritten in 22, there was a requirement added, which was to have a fund administrator or an annual audit of the fund. And what we're typically seeing in the space is people employing the fund admin option. So again, it's not necessarily required. Projects could opt for the audit, but a lot of program groups like HomeFed have opted for the fund admin option. So that fund admin is basically a third party group that's going to review and approve any movement of funds within the investment. So your funds are typically going to go to an escrow account. That fund manager or fund admin is going to have to approve the release of those funds from the escrow account and then ultimately down to the borrower, the JCE. So it's a third party overview that's, protecting the integrity of the fund, protecting the investors, providing another layer of oversight and integrity to the EB-5 offering. So all good things for the investor, something nice to look for. Again, it's not required. So there is no fund admin, it's
Mhm.
not to say it's a bad offering, a bad fund, but the fund admin is just, again, another layer of protection for our
Mhm.
EB-5 investors.
What
I
type
got
of information do you provide to the fund admin to at least draw down on the next tranche of capital?
Yeah, so I mean, at the very basic level, they need to see that the investors are fully subscribed into the offering. They're going to look at the subscription agreements. They're going to look at the signed escrow documents. They're going to make sure that the investor has filed their 526E petition. That's typically kind of the trigger for an investor's funds to be released to a project, is that the investor has in fact completed the subscription and filed their 526E with the government. And then beyond that, they're going to look at the loan agreement, right? There's stipulations and things that have to happen before funds can be released to the project. So they're going to look at project expenses, project costs. They're going to look at the contractors' invoices, and they're going to say, "Yep, this is a valid expense. Therefore, these funds can be released to the borrower at this time."
So, Braxton, I just have one more question, but
you.
a lot of the investors today are coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I want to release my funds the day I get my receipt." What's like a real time frame of drawdown on that capital to make some of these people, understand what they should expect?
That's a great question. And that's going to be different for every project, right? Some projects have already spent capital and they're able to release the EB-5 funds almost immediately. Other projects have not started construction, right? We can't release funds from escrow to a project that has not spent any money yet, that does not have bills to pay. So I've seen cases where investors' funds are sitting for over a year. That's obviously not ideal. In an escrow account, not being utilized, not creating jobs. And I've seen cases where the funds are released within 30 days of investment, right? And it's all going to depend on the project, their readiness, their ability to utilize those funds, in their, job creating activities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think depending on the project that we look at, that release of capital into the project could begin the loan term, or some of them have loan terms that started from an X date that the entire fund is starting at the exact same date. So I think that's important to take into account.
Yeah, that's a key point, Andrew. So a lot of projects, like home feds, the loan term starts when the funds are released from escrow, right? So if your funds are sitting in escrow, it's not really doing you any good. You're still going to have to endure that full loan term after funds are released. Whereas some other projects may have a loan term that started 6 months ago. So if your funds are in escrow, it's not really hurting you. You still have a specific set maturity date, that you're getting closer towards whether or not your funds have been released. But again, your funds do need to get released and do need to be at risk for the requisite amount of time in order to get your green card and not have any issues.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Thanks, guys. So I'll move to you, Andrew. You had mentioned, projects, and there are a lot of projects on the market, and you guys analyze pretty much every single one that's on the market. Can you talk about a little bit, some of the pros and cons between a senior versus a preferred equity versus a mezzanine? How do you guys analyze these deals and the pros and cons for the people that are listening and they maybe don't know which path, you guys would refer?
Yeah, I mean, we generally like to go into senior loans. We see some kind of protection in the collateralization of those loans. That being said, I mean, there's some collateral projects out there that I think the underlying collateral doesn't have enough value to cover the senior loan. So just
Mhm.
because there is a collateral, like what's the true value of that collateral if this project doesn't take off? That's important. There's some mezz deals out there where the senior, isn't that great. It's not a large percentage of the capital stack, and the mezz does come in there. So, what's going to be the value at this project, the end of that completion and stabilization? And does that cover enough for maybe just 10% or 15% senior, and then the balance being mezz with some equity in it? So, end of the day, we want to see a lot of equity in the deal. I think that's a protection. Or we want, if you're in a senior position, that collateral has value to cover the senior should you have to foreclose on the asset.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. And like everything, there's pros and cons to it, right? But I think the consensus is senior loans inherently are more desirable, for the consensus, for the general population. Cool. Matthew, there's a lot of talk with like the retrogression, the visa bulletin, all that kind of things. Can you kind of give me a little bit of an updated breakdown on where we're looking at with the visa bulletin? Is everything current? Are we expecting anything coming here shortly soon? What's your take on that?
The visa bulletin usually comes out usually the second to third week of the month. I know we're recording this today is December 12th, so it could be coming out right this second. So
Hmm.
that's a bit of a difficult question to answer. What we know is that the RIA has pulled 32% of the visas into set aside categories, starting with the RIA going into existence in 2022. And from the moment that law was passed up until the moment I logged onto this webinar, every single category has been current.
Okay.
Um, there was a projection in fiscal year 2025, which was last year, right? Because we're technically in government year 2026 now, that there would be a cutoff date established. There wasn't. So it's very difficult to predict this. A lot of people better at math than me have tried to make a living doing it. We do know that the demand for the amount of visas is greater than the supply. We do know that as of now.
Hmm.
But USCIS isn't approving the cases fast enough to immediately trigger a cutoff date, again, as of the moment I logged onto this webinar. We
Right.
know it's coming. And it specifically will come for countries of people that were born in either mainland China or India. It's not clear which country will hit first. It's not clear which category will hit first, at
Mhm.
least as of now.
Yeah.
So our advice to investors is, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Try to get your case filed, get your place in line with the advent of concurrent filing in the RIA. You can protect yourself for the most part of a lot of the pain of not being in the US, not having work authorization documents, not having travel abilities. Talk to a lawyer. Everything's different. Everyone's circumstances are different. Uh, this is a very long-winded way of me saying I don't know exactly, but that's the current situation on the ground.
I gotcha. Cool, cool, cool. And like you said, the upcoming visa bulletin could be coming out here any moment now. So
My
we'll
phone hasn't blown up yet, so I don't
yeah,
think
it
it's
hasn't
out
blown
yet.
up. All right, then you're good. Cool. Trevor, from you guys at HomeFed, you guys do large scale developments and large scale projects. When you look at market analytics and trends and stuff right now, do you guys view the market as a little bit more optimistic, or what's your take right now on how the market's looking for continued EB-5 development?
For the EB-5 program itself and investor
Yeah.
interest,
Yeah.
I mean, right now the interest is off the charts, right? We have a deadline looming right next September. We're seeing interest from all around the world, all different types of investors, a lot of, H-1Bs, students here in the US. So, I mean, we're expecting the next 10 months to be as busy as I've ever seen in EB-5. Now, of course, you know, we hope the program continues past September, and I personally expect it to continue. But we always get these deadlines. This is kind of the routine in the EB-5 space, and we rush up to the deadline. We see a lot of activity. So we're very bullish on EB-5. We're honestly we're selling out of our projects too quickly. We're trying to find new projects that we can bring to market because the demand is there. EB-5 investors are plenty right now, and we're doing our part to, provide quality investment opportunities.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that at, EB5 LA as well, as the interest has been the highest it's ever been, so to speak, in
Mhm.
terms of overall, volume of prospective investors. Cool, cool, cool. I'll move to you, Andrew. Somebody asked, they're weighing the options of investing in a project directly versus acquiring the help of a BD or an agent. What would you say the biggest advocate for somebody in your position and well, the biggest advocate that you guys would provide to clients and maybe the biggest selling point you guys would have?
Yeah, so no, I appreciate that question. Obviously, that supports my case here, but
Yeah.
outside of that, a lot of these investors, maybe English isn't their first language,
Yeah.
and now they're going into legalese, and then they're comparing immigration investment docs across different asset classes.
Mhm.
And it's just so overwhelming. Like just stating that statement is overwhelming, right? So you start putting all these pieces together, whether you're looking at Trevor's project in San Diego, your guy's project in Texas, and two different asset classes, and those are both real estate. But then what if you go into a steel manufacturing mill or a data center or clean energy, and now you're going across all these different assets, and outside of that, you're like, which one of these players has been around a long time? Which is going to have staying power if there is a lapse in the EB-5 program? Are they going to be able to protect us? Because we have heard of a lot of regional centers out there, not a lot, but some, I guess, where they were smaller players. The EB-5 program lapsed back in 2021. And now that people are getting to the point where they're getting to 829s, these guys are nowhere to be found to help them file the 829s, right?
Yeah.
So we tend to kind of lean towards some of these bigger regional centers that have staying power.
Mhm.
And our association to you guys as potential investors is we have been there for 14 years. We can hold your hand through this process. We can get in touch with these people when sometimes you can't. And we're guiding you in the right direction where I think is going to be best suited for your protection. Where if you're going alone, you maybe can be sold the dream, but it doesn't mean everything that's being told to you is accurate. And we have the ability to kind of turn the screws on some of these potential projects, including you guys. Sometimes I turn the screws on Braxton and Trevor and say, hey, there's these different avenues that might occur that are negative to your sales case, but we have to put
Mhm.
it out there because we want the investor to be knowledgeable about the different circumstances that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And the
If I
biggest
can
thing,
jump in there too, I think
yeah.
he left out the most important point because we get this question more than anybody, is that an immigration attorney's role has to be limited in this process. One, we just don't have the licenses that someone like Andrew has, and two, we don't necessarily have the training. I mean, I've read thousands of PPMs at this point, but uh, the most important thing is that no one generally teaches us, or more importantly, ensures us if we give investment advice. So Andrew had kind of opened his discussion with the first question you asked him about the importance of various securities on the loan in the capital stack, right? If immigration lawyers are giving that advice and saying go with project A instead of project B because the loan terms are better in project A, that's kind of a red flag. We don't have any protection from our malpractice carriers if we do that. And so we frequently refer people to Andrew or someone like him so that they can get that kind of advice because they want it. But I think going to an immigration attorney to give that advice is generally a bad idea.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Braxton, this is kind of rolling into a question I wanted to ask, if I can ask it, because Matt's here. So we get a lot of questions, and these projects out there that are kind of fly by night promote these 2-year terms because of the at-risk requirement from USCIS. We know that there's an ongoing discussion between the industry and the legal departments of the US government about what that interpretation of that risk is. We were supposed to get notice in November, right? I mean, that's what I was assuming was going to happen. Have you heard any of the updates? What should we expect? What's like, the best case scenario for an investor to make sure that he's secure, that he gets his permanent green card?
Um, we do a lot of litigation. We didn't do that particular litigation that you're referring to. I don't know if that was the wisest course of action with 2020 hindsight. You're right, though. The government blew their representations as to what was going to happen. The government seems to be blowing deadlines left and right when it comes to what Congress told them to do under the RIA. This is a bit unclear from an immigration only point of view. And I can't stress this enough, right? From an immigration only point of view, I would prefer an investor not go by some fly-by-night regional center, not go and try to find the EB-5 NCE to JCE loan to be the shortest term possible. I understand there's massive opportunity costs when you're doing EB-5, but at the end of the day, you're doing this to get a green card. And I think a more conservative approach with the sustainment period, showing that the funds are at risk, is worth more than the opportunity cost of what you might be getting by getting your money back a year or two earlier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool, 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 cool. All right, we'll transition. And Matthew, this is a very technical question that someone asked, but you definitely can give them a little bit of enlightenment. That someone asked, can someone who's currently on an F1 file for EB-5 while the conditional green card is pending approval? can they also then go and work on an H-1B until the conditional green card gets approved as a backup option? It's a very, very
Yeah.
niche technical.
So with the caveat of ask a lawyer and I'm not yours, this isn't legal advice, et cetera, et cetera. I think the general answer to that would be yes. So if you are an F1 and you do EB-5, and there's a whole host of issues that you should talk to a lawyer about before that we're assuming have been settled in this hypothetical.
Mhm.
Um, the change of status from F1 to H1B should still get approved, right? So you're lucky enough to win the lottery, you're lucky enough to find an employer. It still should get approved because the H1B is a dual intent visa. Now, your particular strategy, like, am I going to go work for my H1B employer? Do I want to use my EAD to open a business? Or, I mean, you can literally do anything legal with that, right? You can work at McDonald's if you wanted to. That's a discussion that is very case by case and should be had with a lawyer for sure. But in the most general answer to that question, given that there's a lot of facts that we don't know, the answer would be yes.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, there you go. Like I said, that was a very technical question, so
Yeah.
hopefully that helps them a little bit. So, Trevor, in terms of the exit strategy, which seems to be what most investors harp on, is how do I get my money back? How does it close out? What would you say, the pros and cons are between refinancing versus selling versus any other exit strategy on the market from a project related standpoint?
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both. There's no guarantees either direction. I think, refi can be a great option, right? But we don't know what interest rates are going to be a few years from now. But the interest rates are also going to affect a sale, right? A borrower is typically going to be borrowing funds to purchase a property. So it can really go either way. I'm not convinced that one is necessarily better than the other. I will say, I appreciate multiple revenue streams, right? So a lot of projects, it's all or nothing, right? The project has to sell, the project has to refi. If it doesn't do either of those, you're in trouble. Some
Mhm.
projects like HomeFed, we have multiple components to a deal. We got cash flows from home sales, we got cash flows from rental operations, we got land sales, et cetera. So I do appreciate when there's multiple sources of revenue, multiple opportunities to generate cash and proceeds that can then be used to repay the loan. But refi versus sale, I'm okay either way as long as there's a comfortable buffer there, right? If you have to refi and you have to reach a certain, price point, or you're not going to have enough funds to repay the investors, you need to, you know, stress the model a little bit. Understand, hey, what if we only, get 90% of what's projected in the pro forma? Can we still repay our bank loan and or EB-5 loans? But one or the other is not necessarily better in my estimation. It's really dependent on the project itself and the underlying assumptions.
Yep, I gotcha. Cool, cool, cool. So for Andrew, somebody asked, as you guys analyze projects, how important is a developer's track record versus a regional center's track record? What is more valuable in the eyes of a, agent?
Um, Yeah, I mean, they're both probably equally valuable, but financial, like you're going case by case on the individual project, right? There's a lot of large regional centers out there that have a great history and they have a bunch of different asset classes among different states within the US. Some people kind of go blindly into a regional center because they have past success, regardless of
Mhm.
what the project is. And I have that happen a lot. But I think you need to really narrow down onto that specific investment because the protection of that investment is that specific fund, right? You need that project to be successful to recoup your capital.
Mhm.
Because the regional center is successful in other deals is great. And it shows that they know what they're doing. They do their own proper due diligence and onboarding. But it doesn't mean that that project specifically is going to be successful itself. They're all kind of standalone entities. So for your financial success, I think that specific project that you're investing in is what you should be focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. And then Matthew, for a rule versus an HUA timeline for getting the conditional green card, what
Yeah.
exactly are the timelines looking at to get that CGC?
Yeah, I think we kind of answered this earlier, and the answer is there's going to be quite a bit of variance.
Mhm.
All things considered, if you make absolutely everything equal, Rural should go faster than high unemployment because it's given something called priority processing under the RIA. But
Hmm.
rarely do we have situations where all things are equal.
Hmm.
Um, I think that, again, as I mentioned earlier, the most determinative factor is 956F approval.
Hmm.
And as of today, there's no quota backlogs at all. So country of origin of the investor shouldn't matter. That might change in the future. And so as of December 12th, 2025, I would say rural, all things being equal, but that could change based on individual circumstances, individual projects.
Gotcha. Gotcha, gotcha. And then there's one particular, well, not just one, there's a handful of questions, so I guess I'll address it to each of you three. The question keeps coming up about taking a loan, getting a loan, an RC loan. What are your guys' takes on either RC loans or acquiring an external third-party loan to utilize for source of funds? Any of you guys can
Um,
answer.
yeah, I'll start. So there's been quite a bit of a shockwave in the industry about people that took loans from entities affiliated with regional centers, and initially those cases were getting approved. Then those cases were facing notices of intent to deny, and now there's some denials that I think have people pretty worried.
Mhm.
I reading the law, reading the regulations, I don't see a problem with it, but USCIS does, and I'm
Yeah.
not the one who gets to decide the cases, right?
Mhm.
We've had this issue, similar issues come up in EB-5 history going back to 2011 and tenant occupancy jobs, or 5 years later dealing with Chinese source of funds and proving collateral and versus collateralized versus uncollateralized loans, things like that. And there always seems to be these flashpoints that are coming up. My advice right now, again, is to be conservative. Don't try to save a buck or two just for the sake of doing that. And, we do have a new administration. They've only been in office for 10 months. They've not really, excuse me, 11 months. They've not really sat down and crafted real EB-5 policy.
Yeah.
So I think now's the time to be more conservative with source of funds than it would be in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Braxton, in HomeFed's experience here, we got really excited when we saw, certain regional centers getting loans approved. And I think the industry as a whole felt the same way. And I thought, hey, let's look into this. Let's see what we can do. And ultimately, we decided there's too much risk involved with affiliated loans. We fully support investors getting loans from third parties unrelated to the project or the regional center. But when it comes to a home fed, for example, or a regional center trying to issue a loan to an investor, we determined it's too risky. I don't think it's worth it. You can get loans other places, uh, but it's not worth the risk at this time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, for EB-5 LA, we're in the same boat, right? We don't do direct in-house loans, but we do accept them if you go to a local credit union or you take a loan from a friend or family, right? Anything along those lines. But yeah, kind of the exact same boat on our end.
And that's tried and true, right? I mean,
Yeah.
loans financing EB-5 used from an independent lender are as old as the EB-5 program itself, right? And I would say at least until Indian H-1Bs came in and took a larger share of the market, that
Hmm.
was the vast majority of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. I gotcha. Cool. Thanks, guys. Going through a couple of these questions here. I appreciate everybody asking so many questions. We've got a lot to choose from. This makes my job a little bit easier today. All right, let's see here. Okay, so I'll direct this one to Andrew. Andrew, when you guys are dealing with different projects and all kinds of different projects and things, how directly involved is the communication between you guys as agents and the project itself, or does it more funnel through the investor themselves? Is it more hands-on or is it more like back channel kind of communication? What kind of, involvement can an investor expect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm full hands-on
Yeah.
from day one till the end of the investment period. I mean, I don't think there's many people that do what I do that are as active in the conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
investors are calling me so I'm East Coast, so I get some of our tech companies out in the West Coast calling me after work. So I'm getting calls 9, 10, 11, 12 p.m.
Yeah.
Always active in that conversation, trying to be the conduit between the project and the investor. And like I said, the projects, sometimes are not fully transparent or seeing forward on what's happening in potential change within the industry. And I like
Mhm.
to kind of allow them to be direct with the clients and give them different perspectives because I'm here to protect the client, not
Right.
here to protect the project. While I do have relationships with other projects and you guys are my friends, right? We get along. But end of
Yeah.
the day, like the client is really who I'm there to protect. And that's a relationship. I'm more of in a relationship system to
Yeah.
where I hope to get referrals from family and friends in the future,
Yeah.
right? It's not a transaction based. So for
Mhm.
me, as active as I can be, I try to be.
Yeah. We deal with, agents and broker dealers and people all the time, and they're not all the same, right? The level of involvement really has high levels of variance from between people incredibly involved, such as yourself, or the exact adverse where they're very hands off, right? So it's not a one size fits all when you analyze your agents or broker dealers. So we got time for about one more question here, and I will ask it to Mr. Matthew. It's going to be a legal question. Can you take a business refinance and utilize that as a legal EB-5 source for your funding if it's a business refinance? Would
I'm
that
not,
would that count?
I'm not quite sure what business refinance
If
means
you
in
if
this
you own it
context.
if you own a business, right? You are a
Okay.
business owner. Are you eligible to take your refinance for something regarding your business, whether it's physical tangible property or, merchandising or, individual products? Can you utilize some form of business refinance as your own personal EB-5 source of funds?
So you certainly, as long, yeah, I mean, we're getting really into the weeds here. As long as your business isn't the EB-5 business,
Okay.
generally that should be okay. So in the regional center model, that would never come up. In the standalone model, it absolutely could. But let's just say hypothetically, I don't know how this would work with my law firm, but just hypothetically, if I took a loan from my law firm and then did that to finance my EB-5 immigration, that's totally doable.
Mhm.
That's generally called like a shareholder loan.
Yeah.
Um, we we've seen that a lot. I think it was more common maybe 10 years ago, but it certainly has hundreds and hundreds of approvals. USCIS is going to focus on the lawfulness of the business and how it acquired its information. Not that
Mhm.
I would ever do this, but the government in the hypothetical Matthew Galati investor would want to see contracts with my clients. They would want, which would be very illegal for me to give them that, but they'd want to see bank account statements. They'd want to
Yeah.
see annual financial records, things like that.
Mhm.
Outside of that context, if you wanted to pledge a business assets to get a loan, I suppose you could do that post sang. That would not be okay 10 years ago, but probably be okay today. Definitely talk to a lawyer. The
Yeah.
government, though, needs to see that loan contract, make sure that you're not violating the terms of the loan by doing EB-5, as well as sourcing the collateral.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And again, like the consistent theme, there's a lot of intricacies and variance, right? It will not
That
be
was a
one.
really in the weeds question. I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that one.
Yeah, well, listen, they're asking it. We're trying to satisfy, right? We're trying to satisfy. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. Is there anything either of you guys would like to add, anything you'd like to plug, or anything you have been getting asked personally outside of this that you feel like is important to talk about?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know if I'm being asked it enough, but the discussion about the grandfathering
Mm.
expiration coming up in September. Um, I get asked, you guys, I mean, maybe you guys have different perspectives, but I get asked like, why? Why was there a year gap between the end of the program expiration, September 30th of 2027, and the grandfathering ending in September 30th of 2026? What's the reason for that gap, or if there's a perspective from you guys?
I don't know.
It's a
No, not a
guess.
clue.
USCIS.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
not a
asking us to
clue.
explain the mindset of Congress, man. It's
Yeah.
2025. How are we going to do that?
Yeah. Well,
No.
nonetheless, I mean, just for explanation, we had clients in the past in the prior legislation that filed applications, had approvals, ready to go to their consulate interview. Consulate interviews got canceled because the program was not reauthorized in time. And what has changed now is that if you do file before September 30th, 2026, whether or not the program is extended past September 30th, 2027, you're protected under the current law as it is today. That's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
important. If you guys starting to liquidate assets or get sorts of funds together, whatever the case may be, if EB-5 is really the route that you're trying to take, make sure you do it before the September 30th date.
Yep.
Otherwise, you think you can be putting yourself at risk.
Yeah, there's no point in taking on that additional risk if you can avoid it.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the thing Matthew said earlier in the great analogy with planting the tree, right? Best time was 20 years ago. The second best is right now. If you're somebody who's, eyeing it, why wait? Do it as soon as possible. Guarantee yourself that you are in the best position possible to beat that grandfathering or whatever may change here in the future.
Yeah.
Cool, guys. Well,
I
I
didn't invent
appreciate.
that, by the way. That's an
Yeah.
ancient Chinese proverb. So,
Uh-huh. Okay, we'll give you credit for it today. We'll give you credit for it today. Well, thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate each of you three showing up and taking the time out of your day. For anybody who's listening that would like to either consult Andrew, Matthew, myself, or Trevor regarding anything at all, I believe our contact information will be attached to this Zoom link and the webinar link. And I appreciate you guys all. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
guys.
Have a good one.